Fallout from the latest government figures on migration has left Westminster reeling. The recently sacked Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, has called the record high figure of 745,000 immigrants in the year to December 2022 a slap in the face to the British public who voted to control and reduce migration.
Well, Conservative Member of Parliament and TalkTV host Jake Berry sat down with another former Home Secretary, Priti Patel, who believes the government has lost control of the issue.
You introduced the points-based immigration system as per the manifesto that both you and I stood on. We've seen new immigration figures this week. I mean, they're eye-wateringly large. How have we got to the point where the government seems to have lost control of immigration?
So it's really important to differentiate between the legal system, and rightly you've mentioned the points-based immigration system, and I do want to talk about this. And then you've got the illegal issue, which is obviously very contentious, but I don't think the government has handled that particularly well. On the points-based system, there are very, very clear parameters as to how people come to our country, because on points-based system, they come here to work.
Well, the full interview will be on after 12 o'clock, so don't miss that. But with us now is the former Downing Street Director of Communications, Jonathan Haslam. Jonathan, this is very awkward for the Conservative Party, for the government, isn't it? Under David Cameron, we had a party talking about reducing migration to the tens of thousands. Boris Johnson talked about 250,000. That's a third of this revised figure. We're now at 745,000 in the last year. How does Rishi Sunak answer that?
Well, good morning, Sarah. Morning, David. Well, I think the first thing he's got to do is not panic, because we do need to look behind the figures to understand actually what's going on. And it'll be fascinating to see what Priti Patel says to Jake Berry. And the reason for that is, as you've identified immediately, we've got a points-based system. This was brought in, and the intention was you were going to be able to bring in people with higher qualifications. And there was a lot of argument at the time about what was the level, for example, with nurses. Should that cap, as it's called, the minimum level of pay be about 24,000 or whatever it is, 26,000 now. So we've been able to pick people from non-EU countries. So those numbers have gone up, and for the EU countries, they've gone down. And there are other exacerbating factors. And let's just think about who are these people coming in? They're people with skills, they are contributing to the economy, they're paying taxes, and that's a good thing, particularly for an ageing society. You know, we're not quite like Japan yet, but we are an ageing society. We need a lot of people to do a lot of things. So there's a huge amount to unpack. And I think it's important then we also say there are two other factors. First of all, a lot of dependents come in. So if you're coming in from, say, Australia, and you're going to work in the health service, and you want to bring your wife and your children, and you're going to be here for a couple of years, that's not unreasonable. The other thing is there's still a very, very big backlog of asylum claims going on, most of which will probably be agreed. That's about 130,000. Overall, the numbers are going to go down. I think that is very clear from what we see, because you've got Ukraine, where we have, as a very good country, welcome people in from horrible circumstances. And the other factor is Hong Kong as well, Sarah, as you rightly point out. It's complicated. If you're a reader of the Times, go and have a look at Matt Dathan's piece today, which unpacks all of that. But clearly it's a rabid issue for parts of the right wing.
Just
it's
different. In terms of the upcoming general election, this is a major problem, an Achilles heel for the Conservative Party, polling at 19%, Labour Party well ahead. Now, we've talked a great deal about illegal migration, haven't we? 44,000 that came in illegally last year. Here we are talking about huge numbers that have been let in through the front door whilst we've been watching the back door. And I think many Conservative voters will be absolutely livid about what's going on. You talked about the threshold there at 27,000. Suella Braverman has said consistently and for a long time that salary level is far too low. It should be higher. I think you rightly mentioned dependents as well. Of course, we rely on immigration in this country, but to what extent? Isn't the bigger problem the pace of change has been so fast, we don't have the schools, we don't have the hospitals to cope?
Well, this is a problem for government overall, and I think it does identify one thing. Government isn't joined up. So you have silos going, and it is, slightly disingenuous when you have Priti Patel and Suella Braverman, that they were the Home Secretaries, for heaven's sake, saying, it's a disaster. Well, it's your disaster. You should have put it right. You should be in a position of arguing in Cabinet to say, we need joined-up policies, we need the schools, we need the infrastructure. And by the way, if you ask any voter, if you're looking at, say, an Australian doctor who's going to make you better, do you mind if that doctor is in here? No, because we aren't training enough doctors of our own.
157,000 vacancies last year. But you're going to have this tussle, aren't you, within Cabinet, because you're going to have the Health Department, who need staff, the Home Office want to do something about it, and then Rishi Sunak's got to keep business happy as well.
But isn't there one other problem here, which is that if you've got 8 million people who are economically inactive in this country, surely what we should be doing, and I speak as a doctor, is training people to go into health and social care from this country?
Of course they should, absolutely. But if you look at the healthcare service and look at the private social care services as well, they will say, actually, these people aren't coming forward. The 8 million inactive people, I mean, it is shocking. And for the rest of us, we want to see more of what Jeremy Hunt was doing there, to say there is a carrot, which is we look after you, but there's also a stick. So, I mean, you've got to be responsible members of society here. But the plain fact is that when it comes to social care, most Brits don't seem to be interested. And somebody should tell Danny Kruger that, because he should stop misleading people.
And do you think the Conservatives can turn this around before the general election?
It's a pretty hard thing to ask them to do, David. But hope springs eternal. We've seen a 4% bounce because people do like the triple lock. And at my age, I'm fully in favour of a triple lock. But the important thing here is, are people going to feel better? And are they going to feel better? And then there's that calculation. I think we rule out, going to the end, January next year, well, January 25, just because it looks so desperate. And then the balance is between May and October. And
where's your money?
Yeah, where's your money? Good question.
Okay, it's a £3 note, but it's going on. I'm going to May, because if you get a real kicking in the local elections, and you still don't have a feel-good factor, and why would you? Whereas you can do a budget, you can drop stamp duty, land tax, you can perhaps do something else on inheritance tax, although it's a complete chimera, that is. That might give you a lift at the time.
So you're saying early budget, early election?
I would go along that lines. But on the other hand, I might rewrite history a bit later.
Jonathan Haslam, great to hear from you. Thank you very much indeed. Still